Matsuda, who is also a longtime staff member at Keck, and as was already stated, is taking on a new role more broadly within the astronomy governance of Mauna Kea. He has something prepared. And then just to follow up, there will be a continued discussion on topics. After the talk, we'll have the poster presentations and review some slides. Some slides that have poster content. We'll break for lunch, but during that break, you can go out and get your lunch. You need to eat outside, but if you want to come in here after 10-15 minutes or something, there will be a continued discussion on this topic in this room over the lunch hour. We have a good long time for lunch, 12:15 to 1:30. It should be time for lunch and discussion. Okay, so Rich, if you're there and we can hear you, you can go ahead.
Okay, I'm here. Just a mic check. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So good morning, everyone. My name is Rich Matsuda. I am the Associate Director of External Relations at Keck Observatory. My talk today is an update on Mauna Kea governance and management. And I wanted to thank the science meeting co-chairs Lynn and Tuan for the opportunity to present the talk today. Just a little bit about myself. So I was born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii, to a multi-generational family in Hawaii. I'm an electrical engineer by training. So I began working at Keck in 1993 when we were building Keck 2. So that was over 28 years ago. Been here ever since. In the last 7 years or so, my job has shifted from being mainly in technical operations to now almost exclusively on community and government relations. And this, coincided with the protests and controversy around TMT that has occurred in Hawaii. I just say it's been extremely challenging, but also really meaningful work. And I'm grateful to Hilton and our board for guiding and supporting and prioritizing this important work. What you'll see in my talk is that basically we're at a big pivot point in Hawaii astronomy with the new changes in how Mauna Kea will be governed and managed. And it's not just limited to that narrow aspect of management on Mauna Kea, but as Hilton alluded to in his comments, it's a whole change in the way that we relate to our local community here. Oops. Okay, so the 30,000-foot overview is that the state has established a new Mauna Kea Stewardship and Oversight Authority through Act 255, signed by the Governor of Hawaii, Governor Ige, just this past July. And in this act, one important thing to note is that astronomy is declared as a policy of the state. That wording is a little confusing, but the meaning behind it is basically it's a priority of the state. The management responsibility, which has been held by the University of Hawaii for all this time, will be transitioning to this new authority, and there's a 5-year transition, so or sooner if it's able to be accomplished sooner. So no sooner than or no later than 2028, the new authority will have full responsibility for governance and management of Mauna Kea. During this transition, there would be a moratorium on new leases. So just to assure everyone, our current lease, which goes through 2033, remains valid, even though there is a change in this management responsibility. However, for us to operate beyond 2033, we'll have to apply for and be granted a new lease by the new authority for beyond 2033. The bottom line here is that we are entering into a whole new management and governance regime. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how we got to the place we are with this big change. So I won't backtrack all the way to the beginning, but maybe to 2019, when there were hundreds and sometimes thousands of people from the local community and even outside the local community standing on the Mauna Kea access road in opposition to TMT construction. So one of the big moments in that was July 2019. 38 elders, or kupuna as they're called in Hawaiian, were arrested, and that attracted national and international attention. And I recall myself and others in the KEC leadership team feeling very stressed and very stuck at that time. It was overwhelming and unprecedented. Then in March 2020, of course, COVID-19 pandemic created a lockdown for all of us. In Hawaii, the mayor at the time and TMT assured the public there would be no attempt to restart. And so the blockade on the road ended. And at that point, the kia'i, or protectors of the mountain, had been camped on the road for 9 months. But this sort of timeout that occurred with the pandemic was significant because it gave breathing space for all that occurred after. In 2020, the state commissioned a third-party review of management of Mauna Kea, which included extensive interviews with the community, the university, astronomy, and the conclusions were that overall the management was good. It was identified as, Mauna Kea was identified as some of the best managed public lands in Hawaii. However, there were shortcomings mentioned, primarily the lack of genuine consultation with Native Hawaiians. And I'll just read a couple of short quotes from that report, from the independent review. So members of the, quote, members of the Native Hawaiian community, both those who oppose and support UH's management of Mauna Kea, were not consulted on matters related to cultural and resource issues. And then another short quote is, many Native Hawaiians on Hawaii Island feel disengaged and disrespected. In particular, there is an absence of genuine consultation with the Native Hawaiian community that has resulted in a greater mistrust of UH. So in March of 2021, the State House of Representatives formed a working group to propose a new management model addressing the lack of this consultation. The working group consisted of 15 people from the community, 7 representatives from the Native Hawaiian community chosen by the Speaker of the House, and then 4 legislators and 4 institutional representatives from the university, from the State Department of Land and Natural Resources, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and the observatories. And I was the observatories rep. While the working group was formed and working on its report in October of 2021, Astro 2020 was released. And the panel on the state of the profession made recommendations on improvements for how we as a profession, astronomy, could be conducted in improved ways in local communities and indigenous spaces, and called for a new community astronomy model. And then finally, the working group delivered a report to the legislature in January of this year that recommended a change to management. A bill was created, House Bill 2024, revised several times through the legislative process, and signed into law in July by the governor. I would say that the Astro 2020 recommendations were influential in the passage of this bill. The current status, as Hilton mentioned, is that the governor just announced his nominations for members of the new authority, and subject to confirmation by the state Senate. Okay, so one of the underpinnings of the new authority is a paradigm shift called the mutual stewardship paradigm. As I mentioned about the third-party review, UH has made significant improvements in management over the years. And however, as you know, also noted in the review, that some members of the community, including Native Hawaiians, felt astronomy interests superseded cultural and environmental interests when it came to stewardship decisions, including on approvals to develop astronomy facilities on Mauna Kea. So this new authority was formed on a new philosophical foundation called the Mutual Stewardship Paradigm, and I've put an excerpt directly from Act 255 describing this paradigm, and I'll just read the part in bold. A mutual stewardship paradigm in which ecology, the environment, natural resources, cultural practices, education, and science are in balance and synergy. If you're interested, that QR code gives you the full act. I'll just warn you, it's about 50 pages. But this part here is kind of in the first couple of pages. So here's what the authority is really set up to do. So as mentioned, astronomy is declared a policy of the state within this framing of the mutual stewardship paradigm. The authority is attached to the state but independent, and it has land disposition power. So whereas before leases were the decision of the Board of Land and Natural Resources, now decisions for leases, once the transition is through, will be this authority. There are 11 members, and I put a QR code there so you can look at who the members are. As Hilton mentioned, the governor has nominated me as the observatory's representative on that 11-member board. And we're all subject to Senate confirmation. There's no word as to when that'll be yet. The authority will establish limitations on astronomy development. So for example, could come in the form of how many observatories or what the footprint for astronomy is on Mauna Kea, and principles for returning the land to its natural state. I'll just mention that limitations on astronomy would have happened also under the current management regime of UH. In fact, they had published a master plan that was approved that had put a limitation of 9 observatories on Mauna Kea. So that's nothing new, but the authority will develop its own definition of what the limitation is. The law calls for a minimum of 7% of observing time to be reserved for UH. Currently for Keck, it's 12.5%, and this is what Hilton was mentioning previously. It's important to note that the 7% is a floor, and it is to be negotiated with the authority. 7% is not the final number, it's just the minimum. And then, as mentioned, there'll be the 5-year transition. Next steps are the Senate confirmations. From my perspective, it's really important that the new members of the authority who do not all know each other yet establish really good working relationships to actualize this mutual stewardship paradigm. We'll have to stand up the authority with bylaws, essentially making it a functioning body, define the limitations on astronomy, and create a process for the new leases. There are also, as you could imagine, in such a big change, there are many legal complexities and issues in the transition of powers. UH has put a lot of work into the updated master plan and the updated comprehensive management plan. So a hope of mine is that the new authority will adopt as much of that good work as possible, avoiding time and effort to reinvent the wheel. And on Keck's part, we plan to actively engage with the authority as soon as it stood up and during the transition to prepare, so that when the transition is done, we're ready to apply for our new lease. So while there is much work to be done and uncertainties, I find it reassuring that astronomy is a policy of the state as written in law. And I have high confidence that we'll be able to get a new lease for Keck beyond 2033. But as Hilton alluded to, certainly the terms of the new lease are going to change compared to our current lease. There'll be a stronger expectation that we bring benefit to the local community, that there'll be some sort of a lease payment. So the $1 a year lease is probably a thing of will become a thing of the past. The cost of management has gone up since we signed our original leases back in the 80s, 90s. So we'll bear a larger cost there as well. But the bottom line is, I know that Hilton, myself, John, and our leadership and our board at Keck believe there will be a path to lease renewal. It's just the details need to be worked out. So breakout, we have this breakout session coming up, and I've invited my colleague Mariella Chop, who's on our external relations team, to help moderate the discussion. And we'll answer questions that you have about the things I presented, but I scratched out governance because we could have a broader conversation about just astronomy in Hawaii. So we could talk more broadly about community perspectives, relationships, and how the scientific community, you can or will be part of this broader pivot towards a community astronomy model going forward. And hope you come to the breakout. So that's all I have. And just one last thing is, before we go to questions, is that in the breakout, we're gonna post a survey, just a couple of quick questions about how you're feeling about all of this, where you would like to have more discussion or information regarding astronomy in Hawaii and governance and management, and any ideas you have. So if you want to click on that survey and get a head start on that, or at least have it ready for the breakout, invite you to do that. So that's all I have.
Okay, so as stated, there will be an extended discussion, but if there are questions of the factual nature now, maybe we can have some of those.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Thanks for what you do. It's really important. I just wondered if Keck is TMT is considered to have an existing lease, or whether it's subject to the moratorium on new lease.
Could someone repeat that question? I couldn't quite hear all of it.
Sorry, the question was concerning TMT, whether it is considered to have an existing lease or and subject to the moratorium or under a different situation.
Yeah, so yes, the lease that TMT has is valid. My understanding of it is that it's valid. To attain a new lease will be a discussion with the authority, just like Keck has to do that.
It's only about 222.
Through 2033, Hilton added.
Yeah.
Other questions? Okay. Well, great. So thank you, Rich. We will